Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with the Mayor and City Manager. I'm Mayor Cal Sheehy, joined by...
Yeah, good morning. I'm Jess Knudsen, your City Manager.
Yeah, and welcome. So what we'll do today is Friday, May 5th. Welcome to the coffee. We'll go over a couple of hot topics that are going on in Lake Havasu City, and then we'll answer any questions about any of the topics that we cover or anything else that might be on your mind after that. So we'll start with the utility rate study. It was actually published in the newspaper this morning as the feature article about the utility rate study and how it's comparable to the other three cities within Mojave County. That is good contextual information, so they kind of talk about the rates as they compare to Bullhead City and Kingman. Again, great for context. We'll step back just a minute to understand exactly what it is we're doing here in Lake Havasu City. So back when Mr. McCulloch started Lake Havasu City, he created a sod farm out on the island, and that sod farm was enabling him to create an irrigation and drainage district. At the time, state statute allowed for that to happen, and so he created this IDD, is what it's referred to, which contributed about $5.7 million in taxes, property taxes, to our water fund. When Lake Havasu City citizens voted to incorporate Lake Havasu City in 1978, the IDD was supposed to expire at that time. However, the IDD still had some debt from the original sewer infrastructure that was installed back in the early days. And so the IDD remained in effect until that debt was retired or expired. Councils, long before any of ours, refinanced that debt because it did contribute $5.7 million to the water fund, which then kept the water rates low because it was being offset by the $5.7 million in property taxes. The debt was expiring naturally through just paying off those debt obligations. And so everybody this year on your property tax bill received, all of our property owners received a property tax decrease based on collectively $5.7 million. That's what started the need for the conversation. So we needed to replace the $5.7 million that we lost in the contribution of the property taxes. The water and wastewater are what we call enterprise funds. So they're enterprise funds which are solely used for their purpose. So in this case, water and wastewater, it's basically a nonprofit system in which ratepayers pay into the system, and those rates cover the expenses, operating and maintenance, as well as any capital infrastructure. So Jess and his team went and took a look at what our needs were, not just for 5 years, which is our typical CIP or capital improvement plan, but an outlook for 10 and 20 years of what we're going to need for infrastructure on both water and wastewater. They put those components together along with the cost of operating it. So our general team members that go to work every day to make sure that the systems are working and maintaining, the chemicals necessary to balance the waters or clean the waters, and then all of the technology that goes around there. And then they do this magical math equation and tell us what we would need to pay in order to have that enterprise fund be operating in the black. Jess, if you went through all the technical pieces of all of those with you and your team, if you want to share a little bit about that process from your perspective.
Yeah, I can. And then as you speak to it, you started thinking it back with McCulloch days, right? So we talked about the IDD and the sod farm. Well, Mr. McCulloch created the sod farm in lieu of creating a city or incorporating Lake Havasu City at the time too. It was a taxing mechanism. He looks on the books of state statutes and sees different districts. How can I assess a property tax to everybody in the area, and I can use that money to build Lake Havasu City, the infrastructure that all started. So that was in place up until just last year, and that was funding our water fund in a really really weird way, right? Nobody else in Arizona has a property tax that gets used to pay for your water service. So as opposed to the more water you use, the more you pay, and that goes into the infrastructure and so forth. At the same time, Mr. McCulloch did a lot of great things for Lake Havasu City. Brought the bridge, developed Lake Havasu, installed the water infrastructure. What he didn't do was the sewer lines and the sewer infrastructure at that time in the inception of Havasu. So then, several years ago, right, we go through the bonding in Havasu, much to a lot of people's chagrin, the installation of a brand new sewer system within Lake Havasu City. There's a lot of debt that was issued at that time to transform the community with a brand new sewer system. So those are conversations we're having now with the removal of the IDD, what we had to do several years ago with the installation of the sewer system. That debt is still on the books, and every year we pay. Your portion of your sewer bill a little over 50% of that goes just to the debt, the payment to install that system 10 plus years ago. So that's important to keep in that place. And you mentioned the conversation about the IDD going away and started some of the conversations. But I'd add to that because it's been since 2012, since the last time Lake Havasu City adjusted the water or wastewater rates or fees since that time frame. When's the last time as a business owner hasn't raised their rates since 2012, right? So our costs go up. We need to provide that service. And there's nothing more important. Public safety, water, sewer, roads, these are the essential functions of a city government. So we look at what's it going to take to continue to operate our systems seamlessly and provide quality services for the next 10 years. These are projects to replace the existing the lines that we have. We spend about $2 to $3 million every year just replacing water mains and sewer mains every single year to make sure that the infrastructure is there, that's not going to break and provide an inconvenience. We have 3 wastewater plants and making sure that those are functioning properly. We have 1 water treatment plant. We've got to make sure that that's functioning properly. All the equipment, personnel, all the things that are tied to those systems. And making sure over the course of 10 years, here's what we think the cost is going to be. And then we identify what the rates are going to be. And then we have some more nuanced conversations about, okay, so now what's the portion for the commercial versus multifamily versus residential? And that's the puzzle that staff and ultimately the council has to put together to figure out what that means for our community. In the end, we want a nonprofit water system, a nonprofit sewer system, and we want it to function seamlessly. And that's the goal.
So it might sound like deja vu, the same conversation that we're having, and it kind of is, because in 2020, in anticipation of the IDD expiring, we went and did a utility rate study to identify these things. The council adopted a rate structure at that time that really focused mostly on equity, the cost to deliver services. That was what the council gave direction for and said, to Will Dan, who was the consultant that was going through all the analysis, we want each person or each ratepayer that's paying to pay for what it costs to deliver that service to them. So it costs a certain amount for restaurants because restaurants have a large amount of grease. They have an additional expense because we have to clean that water when it goes through the system versus a residential home might not have those same type of expenses. When we did that, we adopted it, and what we did not realize, I would say collectively because the council adopted it, but me specifically, was in the multifamily homes that they were only paying 1 base charge a month and not a base charge per unit. And so because of that, the multifamily rates increased substantially to a point that the HOAs didn't have the ability to be able to take on that additional expenses at that time without any advance notice. So the council came back a couple of months later, said, let's address this. And when we addressed it, we knew we were going to be deficit spending. So we were going to be spending money that we didn't have. We had money in the fund balance, but we knew that the rates were not covering the expenses. We full well knew that. And we said, let's go through and have a whole year of service. So Lake Havasu City, as you all know, is very seasonal. We have our full-time residents that live here year-round. We have visitors that come and go as the seasonality is built in. And then we have property owners or homeowners that come for just the winter season or just the summer season. And so we wanted to take a look at how all of those components came into play on the water flows and how we clean water and how we provide fresh water. And take a look at that in addition to how ratepayers' behaviors are going to change on the new rate structure. So before we had the winter quarterly averaging, and believe it or not, we had citizens that would not shower at home during those 4 months. They would go to their gym or they would do other things to not have to shower at home. Wasn't me. Yeah, but people, citizens were telling us these stories of what they did. They went to really extreme measures. They turned off all irrigation in their houses. They turned off their pool pumps. They turned off everything to save water because the winter quarterly averaging then set your rates for the rest of the whole year. And so we knew all of these different pieces were coming together, but let's take a year, look at the seasonality based on all those components, and then we'll come back. And so that's where we're at. So we're coming back. So it's not deja vu. We're just full circle back to where we started and having those conversations. So on Monday, just a couple of days ago, we had an outreach where we had about, I would say 35 25 people or so attend, which is fantastic to talk about rates. They were very understanding that it's not why do we have to increase rates. We all understand that. It's just how do we do it in a way that is going to be most equitable and palatable to all users of the system. So it's also, before we move on from this topic, it's also really easy when you read in the newspaper and you say, we're having record sales tax collections or revenues are very strong, to say, we'll use those revenues to help offset the rates that ratepayers would pay in the water and wastewater system. Again, it's very easy to make that conclusion, but it's not that simple in reality. So again, they're enterprise funds, which means that those funds have to pay for themselves. So that's one obstacle we have. And then two, it's not sustainable to use a different revenue source to try and solve something else from this type of a perspective. So again, it seems real simple to draw those lines, but I just want to put that out there that it's just not that simple to be able to do those. So
you have a utility bill that you pay, which includes water, sewer, and trash. By the way, some people forget that component that's tied to it. Shoot, I forgot where I was going to go with that. And it happens to the best of us. I'm sorry, for the one time versus the ongoing. So every month you pay that utility bill, right? And so those are funds that are coming in every month that use to pay for the ongoing expenses of the water and sewer fund. So we hear that comment from time to time, right? It just you have a couple of $1 million that are extra over in the general fund over there. That project isn't moving forward or whatever else. So you just take that money and fix it, put it into the water or the sewer fund, and we're good. Those are one-time dollars. And if you take some one-time dollars out of the general fund and you put it towards a system that needs ongoing resources to make the system work, at a certain point, now the water and sewer funds are going to go broke, and your general fund is going to go broke, and then you're in a really bad spot. So that it's really important to separate the water and sewer, our enterprise funds, from the other funds, because if you start offsetting those payments and those funding level, then we're in a whole lot more trouble than we were on the onset. It helps you for a year or two at the most.
And the communities that have done that, you've heard about in the news. So they're the ones that are having challenges throughout the country. There's several of them that have been highlighted over the last couple of years that have not invested in their infrastructure and are now having challenges with wastewater and fresh water, even as close as just across the lake at Havasu Lake, California, that are still having some challenges there. Before we move on, I would be remiss, though. We do have Luann Striley in the room, and she was one of the original admins for the IDD. So we actually have history in the room.
One second.
Let's get you so the folks at home can hear as well. Yeah.
It does? Mm-hmm. Well, yes, I worked for the IDD, and I did the water and sewer bills by hand on a Wang machine. Huh. And I had these books come in every first of the month. There were about 15 books, and then turn around and have to put them in for the pay, the people receivable. So it was challenging, but it was fun. And I did work for the ID&D, I was there for that.
Yeah, she was one of the originals.
I didn't know you.
Yeah, you're part of history here. We thank you for that. Yes. Yeah. We'll transition over to the budget. We are in the thick of our budget season right now in Lake Havasu City. It starts two times. There's two starts. So the official kickoff of budget season is during the planning session for the council in February. That's when I say it's the start. But Justin and his team would say, no, we're many months ahead of that. So
many months. For the staff, we were just talking with Jill Olson, our admin services director. She said yesterday, and the presentation that will be coming forth on Thursday. It's a 10-month process for staff. So we adopt the budget. We take 2 months off. Jill and her team essentially take 2 months off, and then we're right back at it, doing it for the next following year.
Yeah, it's a never-ending process, but it's a really important process, and it's good things are coming out of what we have. So I'll talk about a few of the highlights on the budget of what we're talking about so far. So we had an initial conversation in February with the council, talk about high-level priorities of what the council would like to see as we enter into the discussions on the budget. We then had a workshop a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, about kind of a general budget overview. Where do we stand? Where are we going? How do the revenues look and anticipate for year end, our fiscal year end on June 30th? And then we talked a little bit about our capital improvement plan, which again is a 5-year plan that we look out for when we come to those components. So really happy to say that the council and staff have been able to come to a working agreement right now that we will be able to provide a budget that is fiscally conservative, does not have any debt financing, no tax rate increases. In fact, we'll be able to keep the property tax rate flat for the 6th year in a row, which is fantastic. We'll be able to make some really great investments in infrastructure and priorities that our community is looking for, which include Station 7, Fire Station 7 that was identified most recently in our fire study operations plan that came out. Then that was January, where council had an update. But the chief Palafis and his team spent a whole year kind of analyzing all things fire. So equipment and staffing and future and needs and all of the components. And it was confirmed that Station 7 would be able to do that. And we will be able to do that paying cash to get Station 7 online. We'll also be able to do some investments in some of our park maintenance, some deferred maintenance in our parks. So all of the parks that we currently have could use a little TLC. We've had some citizens and parents that use our fields come before the Parks and Rec Advisory Board as well as City Council. And they brought some really great suggestions of simple things like put a fence here or move a fence here or move the mound in this area. And then we can use the field for a couple of different purposes. But of course, that costs a little bit of money, not a whole lot of money, but a little bit. And so we'll be able to have funds available for that. The facility that we're in here today, the police department, has a whole lot of deferred maintenance. This building is over 30 years old, and there's times that I walked into records, just as quick as a couple of months ago, and it's raining water through the pipes, and there's tarps everywhere. So this building really has a lot of internal plumbing issues, air conditioning issues.
Electrical, AC, for sure.
It runs the gamut in this building. So we'll be able to identify and take care of all of those issues in this budget. And again, we're doing all of this without raising taxes. We're able to do it without issuing any debt financing. So it's a really fantastic position that we're in to be able to identify what our needs are and to be able to address those needs as we see. I know that I'm missing a few of the highlights that might come to mind from you and your team.
Sure. The one big one, Island Walking Path, was something that the council directed staff to take a real close look at that. That's been put in place for several years. It gets used by the community, not just those that live on the island, but people travel to that area just to utilize that island walking path. It's in bad shape. And so there's an investment the council would like to make in that in the island walking path this next year. It's $1.1 million for brand new asphalt on the island walking path. The Fire Station 7 with design, the budget's $6.5 million. The investment into this facility to ensure that this building is long lasting and continues to serve the community and the police department, it's $4 to $5 million. These are investments that are needed to continue to invest into our infrastructure and what we have. Facilities maintenance across the board. We spent many years where the city we wait for an AC air conditioner to break, and then we go out and fix it. In the meantime, it causes all the delays for and then puts out the employees and maybe stops operations. So we're trying to get a little bit more proactive in terms of our ability to maintain our air conditioning system. So there's just some basics, and the theme going forward is that question is like what can we spend now and invest in Lake Havasu City and our infrastructure and our ability to provide services that 10 years from now we'll look back and say that was smart. I'm glad we made that investment at that time. So what does that mean? That means taking care of our facilities, our roads, our infrastructure, and then our amenities, whether they're parks or paths or other things that the citizens enjoy on a day-to-day basis. So that's our theme.
In addition, another priority, we'll finish the courthouse. So the courthouse will be finish that's adjacent to this facility. It's our first municipal courthouse ever in Lake Havasu City. We've always shared space in a collaborative way through a consolidated court system that is over on College Street. But now we'll be able to have our own facility, which bring so many efficiencies and also allow Judge Kalali and his team to expand our treatment courts and those efforts so that folks that do find themselves in a position that they don't want to be in, hopefully can have the resources so they don't have to get into that position again. So that's really great. Just did mention the roads. We have several roadway projects that will also be in this budget that are going to really take care of some of the major concerns that folks have. And so I get a lot of complaints about our roads and how our roads are and what the conditions are of the roads. And so I've been starting to qualify that a little bit more because I want to understand how the best way for us to serve our citizens and those that use our roads is to know what it is that's on your mind and what we're talking about. So I had a citizen tell me this week when they were talking about our roads, I was like, the roads I drive are not that bad. I mean, I live on a busy road, so it's maintained at a different level than maybe a side residential street. But I'm on a busy main road and I don't really have some of those issues. And the resident said to me, no, have you driven I-40? I'm like, okay, I get it. Now that puts it into perspective for me. So we're not just talking about the roads that like Havasu City and the ones that we're responsible for. We're talking about the federal roadway system and the state roadway system. So that puts it more into perspective. So that's why I'm expanding this conversation, because I was just talking about the roads that we have to maintain. And that's not what the picture is. So when it comes to roads, there's a couple of good things that are happening. We've talked about this before in this format, that Highway 95 is going to be redone. Yes, we're very excited about that. And with all that excitement, as I tell every time, you bottle it up because I'm going to need you to use it with your patients when we actually go down and get the roadway done, because it's going to be a big nightmare for traffic flow when that happens. But Highway 95 is being done solely with the efforts of Representative Biasucci and Senator Borelli, and at the time, Representative Cobb, getting us the monies to do that from the state. So it's State Route Highway 95. So it's a state highway. They're responsible for it. So we are certainly, we're partners in it, but we're not responsible for the maintenance, nor can we. But so we're precluded from taking care of all of those things. So they wanted to originally just do curb to curb, which obviously just sounds like that's a great idea, right? Like, yeah, curb to curb. Let's do the whole roadway. That's not good. We need them to go into their right of ways as well, and that will take care of some of that transition you have as you leave Lake Havasu City roads and go onto the highway. Those are those small sections between Lake Havasu Avenue and whatever road it is that you're taking. But that's going to get done. The State Transportation Board 2 weeks ago approved the contract or the bid. And now they're out to contract. And so we don't really have a timeline, but I'm thinking fall, late winter, somewhere in there. But as we have more information, we'll let you know. We don't have the information again because it's not our road to
It's an ADOT-led project, and
yes.
we prod and say, hurry up, let's go and do it right. But we wait for updates.
Yeah, it's not ours. But then Highway 4, I-40, yes, that's getting some work too. That's going to basically, Highway 95, I forgot to tell you, it's from Sarah Park all the way to I-40. So it's that whole stretch through here. In addition to our friends up in Mojave Valley and Bullhead City, they got the same funding for them as well, Representative Biasucci and Senator Borelli. So they'll be getting road work as well. If you ever head up to Sam's Club and those types of things, that roadway will be much nicer too. I-40 from basically the bridge at the state line, the I-40 bridge, all the way past Pilot, has a project in the works through ADOT again, that will get some of that area taken care of. And then it's my understanding as they're working through the budget, they being the state legislature and the governor, that they're going to be allocating some additional monies for I-40 repairs as you head up into the Williams-Flagstaff area. If any of you travel that, I don't do it very often, but the last time I did, you could lose your car in some of those potholes. So it would be a great relief. So now let's come back into Lake Havasu City roads. And those are the roads that I talk about on what it is that we're doing. And we have $10 million over the next two budget cycles. So this cycle and the next budget tentatively to do roadway work. And Jess, I know you and your team have identified some of the main areas. The reason for some of the delay on our road work is that we had a bill that was going through the legislature. And it looked very promising, and it was going to offer an additional $10 million for local roadway projects for Lake Havasu City. Unfortunately, that process is unraveling a little bit, but that's how the sausage is made down there. But we had to wait so we could see where it's at. It's still not a done deal, but it's not looking as promising as it was even just last month when we were here together. So if you want to talk a little bit about the roads that we'll be doing and that process.
Yeah, we still have a plan in place for Lake Havasu City. That additional $10 million coming from the state would have been, and still could be. There's a small little sliver of a chance that might still come through for us, but not very likely. But that would just be a real boost on top of everything else that we're talking about. We talk about our road projects through the CIP and some of that investment, upwards of $10 million in some. We're going to be looking at the roads. So our public works team and our engineering team will assess our roads in terms of what's the highest traffic volumes, and then look at the index and conditions of our existing roads, identify a priority, and then in those cases we're actually going to be ripping up the road and replacing it with asphalt. That's a whole lot more expensive than it is to put chip seal on top of chip seal, which is what the city has done for many years. So some projects along those lines were really good investment that 10 years from now we're going to be very happy that we did that. But in addition to that, there's investments that staff will be presenting to the council on the work session, which is scheduled for Thursday, which is the 11th, next week, 9 o'clock, I believe it starts. And talking about just the ongoing day-to-day investment with roads as well too. We need more resources applied to ensure that when these laterals are cut in our roads, right, and the contractors come back and put the cold patch down, which is fine, which is great, but that cold patch is, and then as you drive over it, you feel that bump, right? It's not smooth, it's not level. That's a temporary patch, and that patch should be in place for maybe about 2-3 weeks, and then the contractor should come in and pull up the cold patch and then smooth it out with a hot mix. And then at that point you see the cut in the road, but you don't feel it as you drive over that road. There's no bump there. We need more attention applied to make sure the contractors are doing their jobs, right? And most are doing a fantastic job, but we catch those where it's like, that patch has been in place for a couple months. What's going on? And we need more resources in our streets division to hold the contractors accountable for some of that action. There's crack sealing. There's just general potholes. We talk a lot about the need for a public works team to put some hot mix in a bucket and with a truck and drive around our streets and find areas that they need patching and fixing. So there will be a plan in place, an investment to do more of that, to get more people, more of our team on the street to accomplish that. Not this year, but the last budget year. So going past probably 15 months ago, the council approved the order of a street sweeper. Since then, council approved another one. So we have 2 on order. I just heard yesterday that the first one that we ordered will be here on May 15th. So we talk about big road projects where we're ripping up the streets and putting new asphalt down. We're talking about trying to just the ongoing maintenance of the roads that we see. If we get that street sweeper in place, that's a brand new street sweeper. We haven't purchased a brand new street sweeper at Havasu for a long time, probably 15 plus years at the earliest, I think. Right now we contract, the city pays $200,000 per year to get the 3 sweeps contracted out. So 3 times a year, a company comes in, sweeps our streets and then leaves. And then usually about a day later it rains and then the whole city needs a sweep. The timing, it never works out. It's like when you wash your car, it's going to rain. That's like when we sweep the streets, it will rain. But if we can do away with that contract, maybe as we get these sweepers in, we can have personnel in the sweepers on an ongoing daily, weekly basis that will be sweeping our streets. Sweeping our streets. So there's a lot of different avenues that we can do. But so that's some of the story we're going to tell as part of the budget process on Thursday, just for streets alone.
Yeah, so the roads are going to be addressed, and it's not that we haven't been addressing the roads. The system, basically on what we do for roads, is every 10 years a road gets touched with something. So either a mill or fill, like just talked about with this budget, or a slurry seal, or a chip seal, some sort of a treatment. So every 10 years, again, those roads get touched. What we're talking about is additional investments on top of that just annual maintenance that we do from a roadway perspective. And then the final highlight on the budget is we also have the ability to address some of our team members and the wages that they earn. So the council had a discussion with the team on how do you keep up with inflation? So the costs are going up all over, and how do we balance that out? And so it might just be simple as taxpayers to say, well, my costs are going up too, and there's not anything I can do about it, or I'm on a fixed income, so they need to learn how to live within that. That's a great thought if we didn't need people to provide the services, because they would then move to other locations to be able to meet the needs that they need for them and their families. And so we'll be able to address that compaction issue that's been caused with some inflationary costs across the board and systematically. There's certain positions within our city that are really, really, really difficult to fill. Dispatchers, public safety dispatchers, very, very hard. Water operators, very, very difficult. Some of our IT professionals, very difficult, among others. But that just shows that we have to go out and recruit. We are a business in that respect. Our citizens expect services, and we have to deliver those services, either because that's the expectation of our citizens or statutorily that we're required to do it. So either way, we have to do that. And so very proud that we were able to find a balance. It doesn't solve the issue, but at least shows our team that we care, we understand, and that we appreciate what it is you're doing in the delivery of the services you do for our citizens. So I'm really happy that we're going to be able to address that too as a component of our budget. So as we wrap up the budget season, as Jess said, next Thursday at 9 a.m., we'd love for the public to be in attendance here at the City Council chambers to be part of the conversations. From there, we then will have a tentative budget adoption in June. Tentative is basically when that happens, that sets the limit on any costs. Nothing else can change from that perspective.
Big picture.
And then when it comes to the final adoption, which will be 2 weeks later, that's now the budget for the next fiscal year. We then will have a property tax hearing, because we have to have a property tax and truth in taxation hearing where we adopt the tax rate, which again, I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that it's going to remain flat, but there will be some additional revenues because of the valuations of properties in our community and new construction. So there will be an increase, and that's why you have to have the hearing. Last year, when that hearing was happening, we had some folks want to change that. They're like, oh no, lower the tax rate. And that's the very last thing that happens. So we've been talking since February with our citizens and engaging in the process. We've talked about it every month thereafter here at this forum, every other forum we speak at. We've had many public hearings at the council level where citizens can engage. The time to have that conversation is not after the whole budget's already adopted predicated on that tax rate to be able to change it. So on the very front end of this year's discussion, we talked about the tax rate and what that looks like, and make sure that the council was on board with keeping the tax rate flat, and they were on board based on, again, the engagement, at least my vote was based on my engagement with citizens, and I'm sure that my colleagues on council predicated their vote on that as well. So that's the budget. Stay tuned. But those are basically the highlights. And we're glad to be able to present that budget to the citizens that, again, keeps everything kind of the same as it was last year, with the exception of making really amazing investments in what it is that we get to do here and have quality of life here in our great communities. So talk a little bit about the airport. So the airport runway we've talked about in the past, it's closed. It closed on Monday, May 1st, and for its pavement rehabilitation project. Our airport also was done right around the same time that this police facility was built. The aquatic center, the police facility, and the airport was all around the same time. Airport used to be on the island with Mr. McCulloch. It then moved out to where its current location is on Highway 95, but the runway means it's 33 years old. So we were able to get a grant from the FAA and also ADOT. The city had a real small contribution, about $250,000 of the total project, to redo the entire asphalt. We worked with different stakeholders out at the airport, the FBOs, the general aviation users, and other users to determine what the best time frame was, in addition to the contractor. So the contractor obviously doesn't want to be out there in August and July with hot asphalt, but our slower season at the airport is in the warmer months. And so we had to balance that out, and we were able to accomplish that with a May start date. Now, some of you that are watching at home are sitting here like, why do they talk about the airport? It doesn't even mean anything to me. It's just a playground for people that can afford an airplane. And nothing could be further from the truth on that airport. It is a huge economic driver for this community. The amount of economic activity that occurs in there for just the general operation of our city is amazing. And if you get an Amazon package, you love the airport because the airport plays a pivotal role in getting you your packages. Also with mail, the U.S. Postal Service uses it, organ donors use it, and medical folks use it. If you have to get air flighted out of here, you use it. So there's lots of different reasons that you would use that airport, even if you don't think you use it. And of course, I'd be remiss to mention the U.S. military uses that, and for their training exercises, which obviously they then go and defend us when the time arises. So very, very important. But the airport will be closed for about 45 days or so for the renovation of that. Jesse, you're involved more in the day-to-day on that side. I don't know if you have anything to add on the runway closure, then we can pivot to hangars.
Some kind of boring technical aspects that probably nobody cares about. But one of the things that we did, the taxiway, maybe 2 years ago, and we did that project. So all the taxiways were rehab. So removal of the existing asphalt and replacement with brand new taxiways. And now we're doing the runway. When we did the taxiways, one of the things that we ran into a problem with was we were driving all the way to Bullhead City for some of that asphalt and then driving back. And then when it gets back to Havasu, they take the temperature to make sure it's of good quality before we lay it down. And if it wasn't passing those tests, we had to reject the load and then send it back to Bullhead, essentially. So that delayed that project quite a bit. And a lot of people were looking at the airport going, why are we closed today? Nothing's happening. Well, we're doing a lot. We're rejecting a lot of loads today. This time around, the contractor, Sunland has brought a batch plant strictly on to the site. So they're making the asphalt right there on site. Quality of the asphalt works out much better. The process goes much quicker, and so that's a big difference from the just a year or two ago when we did the taxiways. So everything's looking pretty good. Some generator issues, some things like that occur from time to time. We'll get through all that. The anticipated timeline is mid-June. And I feel pretty confident that we can meet that date.
And just last council meeting, the council gave approval to spend money that was budgeted, but to basically do a seal coat in front of some of the hangar spaces while the airport's down. That area also obviously needs to be maintained, the asphalt and stuff. So while it's down, they'll be able to address that issue as well. Now, another item that we're talking about is hangars. So we'll talk about in perspective of what that looks like and why we're even having the conversation until a hearing that we had last week or 2 weeks ago. But during our planning session this year, we kind of changed around the way the agenda works. And so traditionally, we would have council feedback or council input at the end of a meeting. And it's a full day meeting. Sometimes it's a full day and a half meeting. And at the very end of that, we would have council discussion. So as you could imagine, at the end of that, everyone is just fried. And so generally there isn't much discussion because it's been a day or a day and a half of really intense conversations about the future of our community. So we moved it to the front end this year. And so we gave each council member had the opportunity to bring forward a topic that they wanted to potentially discuss. And kind of like in a Shark Tank style, we gave consensus yes or no to move forward. And so everyone would kind of in a rapid force say, I want to talk about this, brief conversation among council if we wanted it to move forward to a public hearing in the future. So each council member did that. A couple of the highlights of those types of things were, how do you get things on the agenda? What time does our meeting start? Which both of those things had a public hearing and changed based on the conversation that initiated there and then was held at a public hearing. And then we had another item coming from our airport liaison, council liaison, Councilmember Dolan, to talk about hangars and hangar space at the airport. We are lacking on the number of hangars that we have out there. And so he wanted to have that conversation. The council by consensus during our kind of Shark Tank style at the planning session said, yes, let's move that forward. And so we had that conversation at our last council meeting. That's one part of the conversation. Now, the other part of the conversation is that we have an RFP out that is to expand the south area of our airport. We have land available. Our general plan, our general master plan for the airport, a very recent document that was just updated in 2020, identifies certain needs out there. We've had 3 RFPs now. One, we didn't. It wasn't in the same area. It was a different area of the airport. The second one was for the area I'm talking about, the south part of the airport. We had no interest or no bids. We did have interest, but no one actually put an RFP in. We then started having, through the airport manager, was having conversation with users or people that were interested in doing something. And so they reissued that same exact RFP for the south part. Everything's identical, except the dates were updated. That's the parallel conversation that's happening, that as you can imagine, they intersected. And it kind of looked like we were having this one big conversation, which we weren't. It just happened that the timelines intersected. So right now that RFP is still out there. It was extended from the time our last hearing was till May 12th. So next week will be the closing date for that RFP. And that will be, again, developing the south end of the airport with things. It's a very wide open canvas, if you will, of what could happen out there. But anything from hangar space to gasoline to maintenance,
Mechanic services, any other small
airplane
business.
wash site was discussed at the public hearing from users of the airport. So whatever comes forward, there will be a selection committee. That selection committee will work and identify if the proposals, if any, hopefully there are meeting what the needs of the RFP are, and then they will start into some discussions and negotiations, bring it to council for input and or approval of whatever that looks like. So the outcome, I said a lot of things about airport, but the outcome was we know we need more hangars. And for general aviation users and also for some of our jet users seemed to be an issue. And even some of the experimental aircraft folks were present as well, and they are having some deficiencies. We learned through the public engagement process of that public hearing that general aviation maintenance facilities are of concern. And then that washing bay, there's a name for it, but how you wash airplanes, I guess.
Plane wash.
Yeah. I don't know what that is, but there was a word for it. And so some of those things I would anticipate that anyone that was interested in replying to the RFP, I'm sure they were watching that hearing and they were able to hear the input from the users and citizens in general about what that is. So more to come on that?
Yeah, more to come on that. I think that what kind of started these conversations is we had a lot of people that came to the city or came to our airport and said that are users. By the way, we have 100 people on a waiting list for a city-owned hangar. So we have 20-some hangars and 100 people that are waiting for to be on that list. Some have been on that list for 10 plus years. And we got people coming to the city and saying, hey, we want to just make a pad available. I'll build my own hangar. We had those that have bigger jets that come to the city and say, hey, we want to be able to build a hangar. Maybe I store a jet over in California and I'm paying several $100,000 a year just to store a jet over there. I'd love to build one and invest more money into Havasu, which might lead to investments with jobs and businesses that might attract. So we get all these people saying that they want a hangar. They're all one-offs. They come to the city, and so we look at it, and our engineering team says, okay, if we make this space available, just to bring a taxiway to this area, just to bring the utilities and to do the grading, it's like $1.8 million just to have land available for somebody else to build on it. Now, there's got to be a better way. So in terms of, rather than our general fund paying for that, let's talk to the private sector. So we put an RFP several months ago, got no hits on it, no proposals whatsoever. We've had some conversations since then, and we're hoping for 1, 2, or 3 proposals that might come in on May 12th. At that point, it would be a private investment coming in, investing those dollars on whether it's hangars or other ancillary businesses that are associated with aviation to build the south end of the airport where we see. We did a master plan 3-4 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark, that basically said this is what we want the airport to look like in the future. We thought maybe that's 20 years out, but maybe we can develop the airport in a way that makes sense according to the master plan, with private investment and minimal, general fund or taxpayer dollars. And so that's the goal. And fingers are crossed, and hoping for some good proposals to come in on May 12th.
Yeah, and the greatest thing about the airport that I forgot to mention at the front end is all of the operation and maintenance, primarily of that airport, are through grant funding. So nearly 91% of everything at the airport is paid for with grant funding.
That runway project was $6 million, and 95% of it was paid for by the FAA. So that's a good grant.
So yeah, again, there are tax dollars collectively, but they're not local tax dollars. So,
yeah, sure.
So it is a good component there. And we'll just go back a little bit. An RFP is a request for proposal. So it's basically we put out what the constructs of what that would look like, and then that request goes out. There's public notice so that anyone that's interested has the same ability to be able to present that. There's then a bid opening, and actually, Mr. Frosley, our Public Works Director, it sounds real fancy, like it's ceremonial, that the bid opening is going to happen at this time. It really is quite boring. It's just they open up the proposals and stamp that they received it, and then they start reviewing what it is. But it's some more to come on the airport, but that's kind of the discussions that are happening out there. Briefly, we'll talk about two other items that are moving forward. The second bridge study is going forward. What this is Representative Biasucci, obviously with the support of Senator Borelli and Representative Gillette, really put some work out to see what the needs were for secondary access to the island. And what that was, it was from a perspective of public safety. And those are dollars that came from the general fund of the state of Arizona to give Lake Havasu City the ability to study that. So, we hear a lot about we need a second bridge, or it's a public safety issue, or there's too many folks that are going out there, and all great comments and great feedback. But what is it? Is that those are just anecdotes and thoughts? But is that true? How many cars go over there? How many cars are going to go over there in the future? I'm about ready to say something that's really going to be unpopular, but it's important to know. The island is basically, most of the shoreline is owned by Arizona State Trust Land. Arizona State Trust lands were given to the state at statehood, basically for 12 beneficiaries. The major beneficiary is K-12 education. And the goal, the driving force of state lands, is the highest value or return for the trust.
Highest bidder gets it.
Yep, highest bidder without any consideration of best use. Okay, so it's all about the money. It's about how do they invest and get the most money for their trust, so their beneficiaries are able to do whatever it is, the work that they do. So that shoreline, in many decades, is going to be developed. Someone's going to purchase it. They certainly will have to follow our zoning and our general plan and all of those things, but it will be developed. And this could be 5 decades out. This could be 100 years out. I don't know, but the future's there. And we have now the ability through this second bridge study to plan for that and identify what that is. So we know how much land's out on the island. We know what the uses of that can be based on our current general plan. And so this study is going to identify what that full growth potential of the island is, and then how do you get on and off of the island based on that. What future, if any, school sites would have to be out there, or public safety facilities, or access roads, all of those types of things this study is going to take into consideration with the future hope from our House of Representative members and Senator to get funding from the state to build a second bridge. So it's kind of, that's what the timeline is that's now been sped up based on opportunity that our House of Representative members and Senator believe they have to get funding for a second bridge. So I'm sharing this with you because we're coming at the state level. They're in budget negotiations, and things could happen either very, very, very slow, or very, very, very fast. And so I don't know what the news cycle is going to bring before we see each other next month. So I'm just sharing kind of these components that you might be like, okay, there's a bridge study going on, but now the state's approved money for a second bridge, and what does that look like? So we don't know either. So these are all just things that are out there, but certainly newsworthy. So I'm sure that you'll read about them if there's any movement on that.
We like things that are kind of linear, right? You start with an idea, a concept, generate ideas, develop a plan, and then implement the plan. This is none of that.
Yeah.
So what's happening right now is that we're soliciting bids from consultants to help us study, to look at the demographics. What's the future growth on the island? That could be 5 decades. That could be longer. That could be 5 years. I mean, in terms of who knows. I mean, we've been bigger surprises that have occurred that's out there. And at the same time, the state now is identifying dollars, possibly dollars, to say, hey, and we'll see how it goes through that process. So, but we study scenarios and what ifs and so forth. But a study happening, maybe the state identifies dollars, and then our concern, or at least my concern, is that the state identifies dollars for a second bridge or an alternative to that. That isn't enough money to cover the cost of the construction. So. That's just my inner voice that is seeping out right now too, because that's some of the concerns. Here, like Havasu City, go build a second bridge, and here's $30 million. Well, that bridge is going to cost $80 million. Anybody got $50 million to get it done? But I am excited about the study, because the study, we put in some concepts within there that the consultants will study, including some modeling. So what does that look like? If we can have some modeling, whether it's electronic or something that we could just kind of look at and say, okay, wow, this is where that bridge would go, and this is how the impact for traffic would take place. What are the impacts to the channel? What are the impacts to the ferry and other tall boats that might be out there? We just had Desert Storm, and a parade of boats went through. How is it going to impact some of our special events that occur down there? Maybe in a very positive way, or something we have to take a closer look at. So. Yeah, a lot happening, but it's not all in.
And one of the best things that we'll get is we'll actually be able to get some visual pictures, so people can see what it looks like, to see if do we like it? Do we want it to be different facade? What is it? We just don't know any of those things. And
how much is the Tower Bridge if we have to buy that from? We got the London Bridge. How much is the Tower Bridge going to cost?
Right. We'll have to see. Yeah. So these are all the components that are coming. But again, we don't know how it's going to come out through the news cycle, because we don't know what the legislature is going to be able to do. And obviously, it would be remiss if we did not have such a strong delegation down at the legislature that are fighting for our interests, led by Senator Borelli, Representative Biasucci, and Representative Gillette, have really done a fantastic job of coming together as a team to get priorities for local communities.
It's been unbelievable
in our area. They've done the most ever that actually are returning it back to our area, and they listen. And again, they like linear things too. And it sounds like they don't, based on how this is all happening.
But they also work in a very big group of legislative bodies,
yes.
Right? So we have 7 members on council. That's one thing to get things done. Can you imagine if it was 50?
Yeah. So there's 90 members between the House and the Senate that they're having to work through, and they see a window of opportunity. And because of that window of opportunity, that's why it's not linear in this respect. Mm-hmm. But really, they are doing such fantastic work of pushing this forward. But it's important that we get all of these pieces of information out, because if you read it, have this backstory or this information, you're like, wait, what are they doing? They're building a bridge before they have a study done? It's just a lot of different components that are there, but that we're all in this together. They just have this opportunity, and the way that sausage is made down in Phoenix is just a whole lot different than it is up here. But
it's a good point, because sometimes we talk about the details of how we're going to make things work, very very calculated, very logical, but we had to take a step back and just talk about how great it is to have Representative Biasucci, Senator Borelli, and Representative Gillette representing us. I got lots of friends, lots of colleagues throughout the state. They're not bringing those dollars back to their respective communities like you see here in Havasu. So that's Highway 95, SLIF funding. These are all big things that are going to impact us moving forward. So thanks to them.
Yes. We'll talk a little bit about water, and then we'll open it up to any questions that you have on topics that we talked about or might be on your mind. But we'll talk about water on a different front. So not from a rate perspective, but water and water availability and what that looks like. So since we've met last, we've had some good news and we've had some bad news. I'll start with the bad news first. we had Mojave County, La Paz County, Yuma County, and the city of Yuma basically sued the Bureau of Reclamation to stop the water transfer from GSC Farms to the city of Queen Creek. They did that basically to file an injunction to stop that whole process from going. And then at the same time, the River City communities, led by Lake Havasu City, we filed an amicus brief stating our position of why the water transfer should not occur. We had oral arguments in federal court in Phoenix in mid-March, late March. Myself and the city manager, myself and the city attorney, along with mayors up and down the river from Yuma to Bullhead City, all attended the hearing as well. We had a really good presence, but the judge considered all of the comments, all of the impacts to this, and we lost. And so there really is no path forward that way, bless you. So they're going to be able to start that process for a water transfer. That's the bad news. The fight's not over though, so we're all still staying unified to prevent any off-system transfers that are occurring. We've also worked with our delegation down in Phoenix, so Senator Borelli, Representative Biasucci, and Representative Gillette, along with other members of the legislature to run legislation that prevents that from happening, certainly in times of drought. And Representative Biasucci actually ran a bill this year to do that. It also wasn't successful, didn't make it through committee in that process, but that doesn't mean we're done there. So on the good front, we've had an amazing winter. And, we talk about here in Havasu, we talk about, oh, it rained, this is so great. It's going to solve some of our drought issues. No, it rained here and we loved it because we don't ever get rain. But it doesn't do much for drought. Rain is really not where the water comes from. It comes from the snow melt in Colorado. And they've had an amazing winter. Over 150% of the average. They believe that they're going to be able to, that Lake Mead will rise nearly 30 feet based on this. They also were able to do some really great things from a maintenance perspective on the system. So it's a system that starts in Colorado, has 7 basin states, goes all the way down into Mexico. They were able to do some things at the Glen Canyon Dam to simulate the actual flows of water. So they were able to move the water at a fairly rapid pace to move some of that silt and sediment that is there. They try to do that annually, but because of the lack of water resources over the last several years, they have not been able to do that. And that then prevents the system from choking up anywhere along the system. And they were able to do it through natural means. They actually just finished that last week. So really great things on the front. That's only 1 year. It's not going to solve the Southwest drought challenges at all. So we still continue to push our way to have a seat at the table. And I've joked before here that we are at the table. We're more at the kids' table probably than the adults' table, but we're getting there. And it's just because we're fighting a fight that is really, really big. 40 million users with lots of laws, and there's an international treaty, lots of agreements that came through as the system was built at different intervals over the years, dating all the way back to the early 1900s. So I mean, it's very complicated and complex. We do have a voice, and they know that we're there, and they're feeding us, so that's good, right? We're able to say our piece and have some conversations. We have had another win since we met last. We're going to meet with Governor Hobbs directly. We being, again, the collective river cities in a united front to talk about our priorities of we need legislation that is going to protect the water resources on the river. And the reason that this fight's so important is, for the river communities anyhow, is that we don't have any other source of water. So we don't have the opportunity for groundwater or anything else because we're so close to the water table. It's just Colorado River water that we have. And we do have wells that come through, but that's Colorado River water coming up through our wells, and it goes against our allocation with the Bureau of Reclamation. So that's the good news on our water. Let's hope that we get another great year of snowpack in Colorado this next year as well. and also on the Sierras, because that feeds California, and they are so thirsty. If we can get them solved, they'll quit looking at us so much, and maybe they'll be more willing to go to the negotiating table because they have additional resources coming from their northern part of the state. So that's the bad news on water and the good news on water, and we'll continue to keep talking water and all of those types of things going forward.
And Mary, you mentioned the fight with the GSC Farms and that water transfer to Queen Creek, and kind of lost that fight, at least at this point in time. That water transfer in and of itself isn't critical in terms of the water leaving the stem or the river area, but it's going to set precedent, right? So the fear is you do it once and then, oh, it's fine, nothing happened. Lake Havasu City is still there, and let's transfer more water. So Queen Creek, Phoenix, all the metropolitan areas, they've reached their capacity for their allotment for water, and they where are they going to get more? Well, they transfer the water out of the emerging and growing cities like Lake Havasu City. So we lost the battle, but the war continues in terms of those transfers out of this area. So, but if this one is successful, it's not going to be there'll be another fight, right?
Yeah. It's not that they're just coming and taking a straw and taking our water. They're buying farm property, like kind of under the cover of night, if you will. I mean, it is all open in public, but they're slowly just buying a parcel here and a parcel there and a parcel there, and then they're taking those water rights and they're transferring them out.
So that land at that point can never use water. You can't farm it, you can't develop it, you can't do anything. It's just dust at that point for perpetuity.
Forever. That would be the new use of it. So it's a really important fight that we're having. I would be remiss, I said that we filed an amicus brief, like Havasu City did, the River Cities led by Lake Havasu City. The key and most important ingredient to that was our city attorney, Kelly Gary. Really had to work hard to ensure that we had the correct counsel representing us in this fight and working to put all of these components together. Although we have a lot of mutual interest up and down the river, we do have some differing interests as well. So imagine putting all of that together and speaking in one voice. Kelly Gary did a fantastic job bringing those partners together and being able to file something that was a really strong argument. And I do believe that the amicus that was filed on behalf of the River Cities was one of the components that the judge had to weigh really heavily. I mean, he mentioned it a few times in his closing remarks in the oral arguments about the presence of us, the unified front that we had, and of course, the oral arguments is where we're in front of the judge, but he read the documents and the briefs that were filed long before we were ever in court. So again, thank you to our city attorney, Kelly Gary, for all of those efforts to bring all of us together and have our message be shared. So with that, we'll turn it over to any questions you have. Let me introduce a couple of my colleagues first. We have Vice Mayor David Lane. Thank you for joining us this morning. Vice Mayor Lane will take the microphone around for questions. And then also Councilmember Cameron Moses joining us this morning. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your service to Lake Havasu City. Vice Mayor Lane.
I saw one hand shoot up real fast.
All right.
Thank you.
You got this one, Mayor?
We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have kind of a related question. What happens when all of the airport land is used up in relation to housing and businesses around that? And that leads into how are the city and county coordinating and working together on the housing studies?
Yeah, great question. So the airport master plan that was just updated in 2020 went through and identified that. And it actually identified all of the land uses that are around the airport and the future uses. And there was actually a change this year. And the change was on, I might get the word, is it aprons? Is that what they call it?
Yes, that runway crash zone, but that's not the exact terminology too, right? So yeah.
So the we'll call it crash zones or aprons that expand out on both sides of the airport, actually to the point that Highway 95 is in the crash zone area. And eventually the highway was going to have to be realigned out that way.
So where the runway takes off, where you take off on the runway and where you approach the runway, there's an area that's reserved. There's no construction. You have to open that up to make sure, in case there was a crash, that it's safe for those surrounding the airport. Yeah.
And then the master plan, similar to our general plan in the community, identifies all uses that need to be airport. It's really heavily regulated by the FAA, really strong regulations that way. So those are some of the protections on that front. When it comes to the housing studies, we ran parallel housing studies, not intentionally, but it's just kind of how it happened. Lake Havasu City went first, led by the Partnership for Economic Development. They identified basically what lands we have left, what the underlying zoning is in the lands that we have left in our community, and what the needs are for future housing. And what was really the big takeaway for me was the lack of apartment homes that we do not have. And so that was probably the strongest takeaway for me. It's I'm not sure. I share these numbers because this is in the study. I'm not saying this is where we need to be, but the average housing stock for apartment homes, and you're taking me back, James, a few months. So it's about 13% is the state average, and Havasu's at 3%.
It was low.
Yeah,
very, very
I think
low.
3%
Shockingly
of
low.
our housing stock is apartment homes. So just to kind of put it in perspective of kind of the deficiency we have in apartment homes. Again, I don't know that we need to be to 13%, but just kind of puts it contextual of where that's at. And so now the county's working on one as well from a county perspective, because the county is going to be a partner in the future growth of this region with expansion out to maybe Havasu Heights and some of those areas. And so they're in the process of doing theirs and putting it together. I know that they're taking data from ours and we're sharing data. Our elected assessor, Jeannie Kench, was fantastic in helping us get data that saved us over $10,000 in the study because we were able to get data from Jeannie to put together in our housing studies. So really, really grateful for that partnership. And now it's just action. So we have the plan. And our intent of the plan always was that it would give the tools to the finance teams, like banks and the like, as well as property owners and developers to have the tools that they need to come together to build something. Now, here comes in the challenge from that. So they all have the tools. But now we're having a really strong, vocal conversation about, I love that idea. And we need more apartment homes.
Where's it
and
going to go?
We need some higher densities, but it can't happen in my backyard. So, and that's what's happening right now. So, and it's occurred on a few rezoning items that have come our way. Again, they love the idea, they know the need, but it just can't happen by me. And that's what we're going to start experiencing that more and more in Lake Havasu City as we're having the infill of our community. So, you know, for those of us that have lived here a long time, you might have a whole block and you might not have anyone on 2 or 3 lots to the left and right of your house, and even maybe behind you is a vacant lot. But that's all owned by somebody. Somebody owns it. And then when they, retire or invest their dollars to build their home or their dream, it's slowly infilling. And so now you go down blocks and you have full on developed neighborhoods, house after house after house after house, where we didn't have that before. Holly and I were talking before this that we got started this morning. I'm so fortunate I have an empty lot right behind me and right to the side of me, and it makes it look like I have this huge yard. And I don't, because I don't own those pieces. And every time I see a tractor or a piece of heavy equipment come over there, I'm like, oh, please don't do it. Please don't do it. We dodged a bullet the other day because Allo's teams were out there and they were doing the work that they were doing in our neighborhood, and they used those lots of staging areas. And I was like, phew, that is so lucky. They've cleaned it up and they've already done all their work, and we're back to don't look at that land, don't look at it, don't look at it. But it's actually a neighbor to the behind me that owns both of those lots, so I feel pretty secure in that. But as that happens, I mean, that infill that we're going to start experiencing that. So we just need to have more conversations like this. And the great news is that in Lake Havasu City, we have a really great entrepreneurial spirit where we roll up our sleeves and we just do what's right for our community. And we're starting from a starting point that in the room, everyone agrees we need it. I'm not seeing much opposition to the need as much as the opposition to the where. And so we'll tackle those conversations. It's going to be painful, and it'll be uncomfortable and it's going to be difficult, but we have to proceed in a way that our citizens have access to choice when it comes to their housing solutions. So, some people, I hear a lot of folks talk about what we refer to as the tiny homes. Yeah, not for me, but the people that live there love it. I've talked to many citizens that love their homes in those areas. Probably is not going to work out so great for me at this stage of my life. Maybe later in my life, I might need something like that. But I've always advocated for housing choice for our citizens. So apartment homes, condos, residential estates, single-family homes, manufactured homes, whatever it is, as long as it fits in our general plan, I support that because our citizens need to have the tools in their toolbox to make the choices that are best for them and their families. So hopefully that was a really long answer. And I don't know, Jess, if you have anything to add to this housing study?
Nope.
All right. Vice Mayor Lane?
Thank you. I have 2 questions. The first question is, on the island path and any other paths that you guys go to improve, will you be using sensitive paint? I mean, that'll help. So if people are walking their dogs, that it won't hurt the dog's feet. And then the other question is about the different traffic situations in the city at businesses, not just like on the streets, but in the complexes like the Ross. I am so looking forward to Dutch Bros opening up and just waiting to see how that traffic is going to flow. And the traffic around Starbucks on Swanson is just completely amazing. So I just wonder how you guys can prevent those kind of situations happening in future growth.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. So the island path is going to be asphalt. It's not having any heat sensitivity. It's asphalt. The Councilmember Campbell did ask for us to have a parallel bid at the same time to compare asphalt and concrete, and so we'll do that and be able to have that component. When it comes to parking lots and private property, it's just that. It's private property. So for anything to get a C of O or certificate of occupancy, they have to meet our code. And our code identifies different flows. Now, there are a few drive-through areas that have recently come forward, Habit Burger, the Starbucks that you're mentioning, that are queuing in a awkward way, and we're working with those ones specifically and have an eye on the future to ensure that that's not going to be a challenge. But just think about this for a second. The whole world of restaurants and drive-through queuing has changed since the pandemic. So if I've lived here a long time, people were so stoked when In-N-Out came, or In-N-Out? Yeah, In-N-Out. Yeah. So back in the day, before In-N-Out, they used to, during Relics and Rods, the highlight of Relics and Rods is they brought the In-N-Out trailer to Relics and Rods back in the 90s, and people were so excited. And so when In-N-Out came, and I lived here at the time, people were so stoked that it was here. We did not have traffic queuing problems then. But then the pandemic came, and now you have to go through all sorts of different barricades or traffic movers to get through.
Cones and chains.
But I noticed the same thing in every city I go to. So if I'm in Phoenix or I'm in Las Vegas, I mean, they are queuing these lines through really large parking lots that never was a thing before. So potentially will codes have to get updated in cities across America? Probably. What is that? Is this the new norm, or is this a temporary thing? So those types of things have to be put in consideration. I mean, if we were talking and having this conversation about needs and buyer behavior and people's behavior, just say 15 years ago, we would be talking about having more parking at Kmart. We don't even talk about Kmart because they don't even exist anymore. And so, I mean, we really have to take into consideration all of those components before we haphazardly change a code because one business is getting a lot of business, which in the world of business, that's what we call success. So, but we'll look to be a partner to address those issues as they arise.
Thank you. You mentioned a new fire station early on this morning, and I think you said the cost was roughly $6 million. Could you
The
speak?
budget number, so we'll get there, but budget is construction's the total project about $6.5 million.
Okay. Couple things. Could you speak briefly about location or possible location, and is equipment included in that? I'm assuming in those figures, personnel, that type of thing?
Want to take location? I can take the other one.
Perfect. Yeah. So the location was identified, which is really great, actually. It's on Sloop and McCulloch. It's a pie-shaped piece of property that we've owned and have had in our portfolio for many years. Always slated for a fire department, believe it or not. And so when Chief Palafis had the fire study, he went and the team analyzed all of the data. Where do calls come from? What the response times are? And they basically put a heat map on top of it. And this fire study is available to the public. So just go to our website, and it's a thick document, but go to the website and you can read through it. You can see these heat maps, and it clearly identifies where the needs are and where the gaps are. And Sloop and McCulloch fit that bill perfectly. So it worked out really in a great position. They also took a look at all locations of all of our fire stations currently, and are they properly located in the areas in which they need? And the answer was yes. So we really are fortunate that way. If you want to talk about the operations side, Jess.
Yeah, certainly. So the talk about the cost of construction that takes place, right? And then you have the cost of the ongoing. So that's the equipment, the trucks, the personnel, and what does that look like? We have 6 stations, obviously, in town. We're talking about Station 7. One of probably the more underutilized stations is at the airport. So there are some conversations about what that looks like in terms of resources that we could pull. But it will take an investment for Station 7 that we're going through right now, but not to the tune of a brand new station that we're starting from scratch, if that's helpful. And we've already started some conversations with what it looks like for our new engines, and we're doing refurbs, and we're purchasing new ones to try to get us caught up and staggering that over several years to make sure that we're not buying all at once and creating that kind of trap. But we'll have a budget that gets put into place for fire. At the same time, we're also pursuing our application with the state for a certificate of necessity. What does that mean? So that would provide us with the ability as a city and our fire department to provide ambulance services to the community in partnership with AMR or River Medical, as it's called in our area. So yeah, a lot of moving pieces that are there. But 100% in terms of your understanding that it's not just the cost of a building, and then okay, now we got to fill it with equipment, vehicles, and personnel.
And Chief Palafis is a pretty innovative chief. He's done some really good things, and he put steps in place. We also just received the SAFER grant, which is a grant allowing us to hire, is it 12 new firefighters?
SAFER grant was 11 or 12?
Yeah, 11 or 12 firefighters to help backfill. So they're all grant funded, but it's backfilling future retirements. But as we're doing this, it'll also offset the need for personnel, part of the need for personnel at Station 7 at the same time. So he's very good at putting a puzzle together in a way that is very cost effective and achieves the goals of the fire department, which in end serves the goals of our citizens. So.
Thank you, Kellen. And yeah, Chief Palafis is a great guy, and he actually saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars when he did that refurbish of the fire engine versus buying a new one. That was pretty unique.
400,000 versus about almost close to $1 million.
Yeah, it was pretty. And when you get done, it looks like a brand new vehicle. Quick question: is there an interim manager at the airport? Because I thought that kind of went under the radar. And then on the who's evaluating the RFPs? Is there a committee you guys are forming to do that?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Yeah, so there is an interim manager at the airport, Paul Blazer. He was the gentleman that gave the hangar conversation update to the council at our last hearing. He's the maintenance lead at the airport. He's been at the airport for many, many years, so has a good working knowledge of the airport. And then Justin and his team are working on the recruitment of a new airport manager going forward for that operation. And then the RFP is evaluated by a selection committee that will incorporate aviation experts as well as key personnel on the city staff that runs the gamut, from public works to finance to city administration and the like. So
you mentioned about the courthouse. Is that a new courthouse, or are we expanding? The reason why I'm asking is because I don't know if y'all had to go up to like the court windows or whatnot and use them, but they're wonderful people, wonderful. But uneducated completely. Like in Kingman, we have a law library. Are we going to have something like that here? Because I feel like we really need that.
Yeah, I love the question. It's a brand new courthouse that the city will have full control over. So it's actually on Acoma. It's the former Havasu Fitness building. We purchased it 3 years ago and are renovating it. It'll be only the municipal courts moving there. So the Superior and the Justice Court will stay on College Drive. The municipal court, which is run by the city and by statute, we're required to have it, will operate there. We will then be able to expand the services. As I mentioned earlier, we have an award-winning veterans treatment court that has such a fantastic success rate. We'll be able to expand that to a cohort court, which will deal with substance abuse and mental health, which will help citizens so that they're not re-offending. And just general population court experiences, about 85% of offenders re-offend, the recidivism rate. In our veterans treatment court, it's less than 10%. So why that's important is not only does it allow for our citizens to be upstanding citizens and contribute to our society, but no one goes to court without first seeing Chief Sterling and his team's group, also being visited by Kelly Gary, our city attorney, and the prosecutors and her team, as well as everywhere in between, and we're paying for all those. So we house them in our jail located here. We pay for that. We have to give them representation. If they can't afford one, we pay for that. Our prosecutors have to go through. So if we are able to do all of those types of things, we'll be in a good spot. And it's expanding. There's days that we don't even have access to a full courtroom as the municipal court. And the Superior Court will also then be able to expand. So some of what you might be experiencing, I'm not sure about their service level or delivery or education, but it's because they're all in cramped spaces right now on all three courts. And so this will allow the courts to spread out and be able to properly serve the folks that they're serving.
So it's definitely not because they're cramped. Like if you go up there and say, hey, I want to be able to file some papers. This is what I want to do. They go like this, like, I can't give you anything. So that's what I'm talking about. That's why we need a law library. I do a lot of things on my own.
Yeah.
I'm pretty educated, but I always have to call Kingman and let them know, and then they send me papers. I want to be able to go here and do it on my own.
This new courthouse will have a law library. I'm glad you mentioned that again. Sorry, I
That's
forgot that in
amazing.
the first answer. Yeah.
So the second thing, many of you may not know this because you're not pregnant. I'm pregnant, 6 months. I've delivered 4 babies here. This will be my 5th one. But labor and delivery keeps closing. This is a major problem. I'm considered high risk. I know I'm not the only person. With it closing, they're referring us to Parker or Kingman. I don't get those chances if something's to happen. I went to Phoenix recently, and I may deliver there. I wanted on my birth certificate for this baby to say Lake Havasu, and I don't know if I'm going to get that opportunity. It is managed, I think, by, I can't remember the name of it, if it's a Life Point or whatnot. And then we have a list of doctors who are either investors or have ownership in here. I really want us to do something about the fact of labor and delivery being open continuously. Being closed for a week is not an option, especially for like 4 times in 2 months. That's insane.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. The Havasu Regional Medical Center is a privately owned hospital, and there's been, over the years of Lake Havasu City, there's been many iterations of hospitals. We used to have 2, so the skilled nursing facility in front of Havasu Regional Medical Center was a hospital, and then behind it was another hospital. We've had Good Samaritan in here, and we've had the Lake Havasu Hospital, lots of different components, and that's kind of where some of the ownership structure where you talk about physicians are located and part of that history of that. Labor and delivery, it's my understanding that they are having an issue with calls. So if one of the OBs is out for the weekend, they might have to close it down, but they prepare the ER in cases of emergency to deliver. Again, not ideal, and it puts me and the city in a really awkward position because we have no say, and we have no say in this at all except bringing and convening people together. I do know they're working on it. The hospital got a new CEO in January is when he first started. He's a rural healthcare person. also a nurse by trade, so he also understands the industry. And I know he's working on that and a few other challenges that some of our citizens have when it comes to access to medical care. But your points are duly noted. I too would want my child to have on their birth certificate Lake Havasu City. And I also believe our citizens need access to health care of all needs. So it is on our radar, and we're doing our part to try and solve that.
Thank you. First, thank all of you for all you do. Havasu is a wonderful place, and it's hard work to get it that way. But one of the questions piggybacks on the ladies as far as medical care. It was quite a surprise when I moved here a couple of years ago because I saw all these medical signs, but what I didn't realize is a lot of these people fly in for a few days, fly back out a few days, and it takes everybody, doesn't matter your age, sometimes weeks to get appointments, and if something happens, you can't make the appointment, there's weeks more to go. Has the city ever thought, I know I've lived in municipalities before that have incentives for businesses to move in so they can get employment for their people. Have the city ever talked about some kind of incentives for physicians, maybe new residents who've graduated, they've gone through their residency, they're ready to put out their shingle, coming here that would live here, be part of the community, be part of what we have, because of the exploding population that you've experienced over the last 10 years, I think medical hasn't quite kept up. And it's certainly great that they are willing to come in, and the doctors I've seen have been terrific. And I love the one that's here that's my primary care physician, but I know I've heard a lot of people saying, I've got to go to Vegas, I've got to go to Bullhead, I've got to go somewhere else, and which means you've got to spend the night. So there's a lot of extra expense there. If there's some way we could get an incentive to bring more doctors to stay here and live here as their technicians as well, I think that would be something we might want to look at for future budgets or future items for that.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's funny. I had to be in Phoenix yesterday for a meeting, and I stopped in Vicksburg to use the restroom and grab some lunch. And someone's like, Mayor, and I'm like, hey, not here. And they're like, me and my wife are heading down to Phoenix because they had to go to a doctor's appointment, and that is replicated all over our community. We understand that. So similar to economic incentives to businesses, state law precludes us from doing that. And so what we're seeing in healthcare right now, it's not unique to Lake Havasu City at all, unfortunately. There's a few components that have done this, and we're seeing it right now here as evidence, but our baby boomers that are retiring at a rapid pace didn't have enough children, and so there's not enough even supply of people to go to med school. And then some of the changes, you might remember the debate over the Affordable Care Act in like the 2008, 9, 10 timeframe. It made it very difficult for people to enter into healthcare and want to pursue that option of a 10-year pathway to be able to provide services to citizens. So we're seeing that deficiency occurring again all over. Then we also have then just the rural piece. So we're really good at attracting physicians. We do a great job of that. We're really bad at attracting physician spouses. And so we get a lot of folks that sign contracts and they come here, and the spouse, for one reason or another, can't find a job in their field, doesn't like the area, wants
or shopping,
and we've heard it all.
Yeah.
And so
these are things.
Yeah, so we know we're at the table, and the one good thing that did occur is the J1 visas opened back up. So my office regularly works with the hospital to do letters of support for J1 visas. We're able to get them through. One of the things I'd like to talk to the hospital about is opening up their educational opportunities because that's generally a great pathway to get docs. And Kingman has some really fantastic doctors, but they're also a teaching hospital. And so they get more medical facilities that we don't have access to right now because that. So there's lots of pieces that we're part of. The hospital's a great partner when it comes to nurses and doing programs there, but we need the other specialties as well. So yeah, it's an open conversation we're having, and we're there at the table.
I just have a simple question. Since we don't have the airport, what happens to our airmail or
Packages?
Yeah, are we back on trucking?
A little bit of both. So they've those that do come in at air have repositioned themselves into the Kingman or Bullhead Airport, but then they still obviously have to truck it from there. And others just are trucking.
Okay, so
Yes.
that I have.
Might take an extra day to get to you.
Amazon Prime is still coming your way.
One other question, and I don't know if this is the right place, but I have 2 lots on the right-hand side of me, and they have never, I've heard that they are from Canada or something, but the lots are getting so trashy and the bushes and stuff, and I mean, they're actual bushes. And, you know, it's kind of hard on me to try to clean them up. What do I do?
Yeah, come see me afterwards, and we'll talk about some solutions
Okay,
for you.
all right,
Yes.
all right.
For other citizens in the same situation, if you contact code enforcement, right? So there's, and we'll get a hold of the address and then pass that along to our team. You shouldn't be out there, yeah.
All right, so our time this morning is coming to an end. Thank you so much for joining us. But as always, we like to end with a couple of fun facts about the city and what we're doing. This week is Municipal Clerks Week in the country, so we're celebrating our municipal clerks. So our fun facts today come from Kelly Williams and her team, Shannon and Marcella, that basically act as record keepers for everything Lake Havasu City. And so the first Lake Havasu City Council meeting was held on October 10th, 1978 at the Roadway Inn. And since the first meeting, over 20,000 individual items have been brought before the City Council for discussion or possible action since we incorporated. Was the Roadway Inn over on Nakoma? Yeah, it was on Nakoma by the golf course, so where the current senior center is. Yeah, so that was at the end of town at the time, was where the first council meeting was. The first polling places established were at Starline Elementary School, Smoke Trail Elementary School, and Fire Station number 1, which is down on Lake Havasu Avenue next to Sundance, down in that area. The first primary election was held in 1979, and there was 24 candidate names for council members appeared on the ballot.
24.
24.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. At that time, there were 7 council members. The mayor was then elected by the council at that time, before we had a direct election of the mayor. Lake Havasu City has had 11 mayors so far in our history. Lake Havasu City has appointed 3 city clerks since the incorporation in 1978. So Ann Sane served as our first clerk from 1978 to 2002. And then Carla, Simidich? Like, I just know her as Carla. I was like, I never said her last name. But Carla then served from 2002 to 2012. And then our current clerk, Kelly Williams, has served from 2012 on to current. So that's the clerk. Then the city clerk's office began microfilming in 1985. And they continue to microfilm all permanent and historical city records. Approximately 10,000 images or records are microfilmed each year for records preservation. 10,000 a year. Isn't that crazy? And then, believe it or not, a typewriter is still used in the city clerk's office today to prepare certain documents. So we still have a typewriter there. Yes. So with that, thank you to our entire city team. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next month. Have a great day.
Thank you.